Good evening. And today, as you may know or may not, today would have been the day that Jesus and his disciples celebrated what we call the Last Supper, where Jesus, as they had the bread, he broke it and he gave it to them, and he said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And then he took the cup also and gave it to them and said, "This is my blood, the new covenant. Each time you drink of it, do this in remembrance of me." That there's a remembering there of what Christ was about to do. But they weren't just gathering for some new meal. If you know your Bible very well, you may know that it wasn't just some random meal where Jesus instituted what we call the Lord's Supper or what we call communion, but it was the Passover feast, a feast that had been celebrated by God's people all the way from the book of Exodus, which is towards the beginning of your Bible there. The second book of the Bible is where they began celebrating it and have ever since. And so there's a significance that Jesus ties what he is about to do in going to the cross with what has already been done, namely the deliverance of God's people from slavery out of Egypt. And so I want to remind you of that tonight. I'm going to share a song here in a minute called 400 Years that I wrote a while back that just kind of tells the story of the Exodus from the Passover from the perspective of a person who would have been there. So it tells that story. But in case you're unfamiliar with it, I wanted to share some of that story with you now. See, God's people had come to Egypt on good terms. Joseph had been there. He had been sold into slavery, actually, ironically enough. He had been sold into slavery in Egypt and had made his way through into somehow becoming second in command in all of Egypt. I'd encourage you to go read the story. It's incredible. Joseph is only second to the Pharaoh himself. And yet, you close out the book of Genesis and you open up the book of Exodus, and it begins with this idea that after Joseph had brought his family to Egypt, there arose a king that didn't know who Joseph was. He felt threatened by the large number of people that the Israelites had. So he enslaved them, forced them to work on his behalf for 400 years. Toward the end of that, he had even felt threatened by their numbers once again, and so he started telling them that the midwives were to kill all of the male babies. Well, God rose up a man named Moses. Moses came back to Egypt once again from sojourning in Midian. And when he came back, he spoke to Pharaoh. He said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh continued to say no again and again and again. Moses continued to come back, and he would give him another chance. God says, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh would say no. And with each of these attempts, God would send a plague on Egypt. And yet Pharaoh continued to harden his heart. Pharaoh continued to say no. Well, finally God said he was going to send one final plague. And he was going to kill the firstborn in all of Egypt. Every firstborn in every house in all of Egypt. But he gave the Israelites instructions. He said, take a lamb and slaughter it and put its blood over your doorposts. And when I come to kill all the firstborn, I'll see the blood. I'll pass over that house, which is why it's called the Passover. This was God's great act of redemption and deliverance for the Israelite people. Now, he would do many more in years to come. He would do so many more acts of deliverance. In fact, even just several days later, he would part the Red Sea for them to walk through on dry land and deliver them once again from Pharaoh after he changes his mind. But it is in this moment where God passes over their houses and spares them, and yet brings this calamity on Egypt, that Pharaoh finally says, "Go, get out." And they are delivered from their slavery in Egypt. And God instituted this feast where they would remember that great deliverance, so that each generation moving forward would become a participant in that salvation. Brought all the way forward to Jesus. And Jesus and his disciples share in this meal, and Jesus says, "You think that's good?" Every time that you eat this bread and drink this cup, you're going to get to remember an even greater deliverance. As I establish a new covenant with my people. And so I hope that you'll be encouraged by the song that I share. I will say I've already recorded the song part, so forgive me. There's kind of a sour note toward the end, but just you can pass over that, and that'd be okay. But I hope you'll be encouraged by that, and by just and that you would rejoice in the deliverance that you can have through Jesus Christ. If you don't know that salvation, if you don't know that redemption, please feel free to private message me or get in contact with the church or whatever. But reach out. I'd love to talk to you about that redemption, that salvation that can be found through Jesus, and the deliverance that God would have for each of us from the bondage of sin and of death. A bondage that no matter whether you're rich, poor, slave, or free, it's something that enslaves all of us. And it's something that we can be set free from only by Jesus Christ. Hope you enjoy. Years, a family of slaves for Pharaoh the king. 400 years we've prayed to be freed, a family of slaves for Pharaoh the king. We were welcome to the city with arms open wide. Our brother, the dreamer, had earned us a good name, but soon he was forgotten, and soon there came the hate. We were viewed as a threat for our numbers, and yet we became slaves so easily. 400 years, a family of slaves for Pharaoh the king. 400 years we've prayed to be freed, a family of slaves for Pharaoh the king. Then there arose a prophet sent to set us free. He brought hard words to Pharaoh and did amazing things. The plagues on all the people brought wonder, fear, and awe. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, he still would not let go. 400 years, a family of slaves for Pharaoh the king. 400 years, we prayed to be freed, a family of slaves for Pharaoh the king. On that fateful night, God gave his instructions. Slaughter set you free to walk out of Egypt and worship me. They say, we're free, at last we're finally free. With his mighty hand our God has set us free. We're free, at last we're finally free. His mighty hand our God has set us free. We're free, at last we're finally free. His mighty hand our God has set us free. We're free, at last we're finally free. His mighty hand God has set us free. 400 years we've longed for this day, a family of slaves for Pharaoh the king. 400 years and it's finally here. We're slaves no more to Pharaoh the king. I hope that that song can be an encouragement and a reminder to you that our God has always been, is now, and will forever be in the business of freeing and redeeming his people. I hope that you will take some time, even now, to just remember the goodness of our God. And yet even so, the costliness, the incredible price that is paid through the lives of the firstborn in Egypt, and for us through the life of God's firstborn, his one and only Son, Jesus. Hope and pray you'll remember that throughout this weekend and throughout your life as well. God bless.